Hi everyone, good morning. Um, Let me first quickly introduce myself. My name is Hao, lecturer, lecturer for Cinematic Art. I'm the moderator for today's seminar session. So on behalf of the organizer, I would like to welcome all of you to our session titled Connecting the World of Films. It is actually a part of the broader series of webinars by Multimedia University titled Insights Humanizing Innovation Session with Film. So thank you very much for sharing us time to be with us now. So let us begin. In the past few decades, we have witnessed an increased pace of globalization with the development of various media platforms. Streaming platforms and OTT networks are gradually affecting the way we view and experience cinema. And as a result, focused cinema and our film viewing habits have also changed. Today, we will straddle between the big and small screens. We will watch films in the comfort of our rooms, our laptops, even sometimes on our mobile phones while waiting for a bus. We would watch films coming from different countries, different cultural regions. We would experience different stories regardless of geographical boundaries or thematic scope. As long as they are available online, we are able to view, experience them, comment on them, or critique them. Thus, availability and accessibility to these films across the globe become increasingly vital. And what does it mean to experience world cinema in today's context? Today, we are privileged to be able to invite speakers from CinemaWorld Asia and from the Faculty of Cinematic Arts to join us in this conversation. So let me now introduce our speakers. First, we have Suarina. Suarina, welcome. Suarina Chua is an entertainment professional with at least 3 decades of experience in the media and movie distribution industry. An experienced media executive, Suarina is the co-founder and co-CEO of CinemaWorld. Previously, she was SVP, Sales, Marketing, and Business Development at HBO Asia. She's passionate about films, passionate about supporting local film communities. She also believes that filmmakers should get opportunities to hone their craft and tell their stories to the world. Next, we have Amir Shahlan. Amir Shahlan, born in Malaysia, but grew up in many countries, very cosmopolitan figure. His work makes use of video animation to create contemporary wayang kulit or shadow puppet in Malay. His recent work has been exhibited in Seoul, in South Korea. He's also an MFA graduate from George Mason University. He teaches cinematic arts in Multimedia University. And prior to joining academia in 2013, Amir worked in the creative industry as a producer and director. He's currently the Dean of the Faculty of Cinematic Arts. All right, so that's all for the introduction. So basically, to kickstart the conversation, let's begin with our title, Connecting the World to Films. This is basically a quote pulled from the introductory page of CinemaWorld. In short, cinema is viewed as a bridge to another world, right? Another mindset, another viewpoint. Could both of you share with us in what ways specifically could stories and cinema connect communities? In what ways could films transcend time and distance? And do you have a personal experience you would like to share with the audience regarding how films could connect people? Raina, maybe you can go.
Okay, personally, I think there are many mediums that can connect people from different parts of the world together. But I personally believe that nothing beats motion picture. Imagine the power of the movie, the moving pictures, and then coupled with the soundtracks or the music in there, as well as the dialogues, as well as the sound effects. It will certainly leave an impact on the audience mind. So to me, the best form to connect cultures and people across boundaries would really be films. And personally, I mean, when you watch a film, you are really being transported to where the film is being made. For example, a film called Age of the which is a Mongolian Oscar aspiration being submitted best for Oscar film. Now, if you're a viewer and you watch the film, immediately you're transported to the vast grass and Cambodia, and you will also experience a united lifestyle, devastating her, you watch how they live, and it becomes part of the whole you get engaged in it. And another good example would be actually if you look at it, think about the Korean way, the Korean soaps. Now everybody eats bibimbap. Everybody goes for the Korean pump. Everybody uses the Korean skincare products. Everyone listens to the K-pop song. Basically, so film is a form of culture, it's form for every country. So So all this, you really get to learn, experience, encounter culture, the food, the traditions, the music, the place, the lifestyle. There's so much. There's so much out there that it's not just about the emotions. And of course, the emotions are stirred, but you are getting more than the other side. Personally, I also met the ardent CinemaWorld fan in Singapore during a baby Matsuri. And I so happened to know that he enjoyed CinemaWorld. That was great to like that was the best part of the afternoon. And when I asked him why, he just told me, basically, maybe because, we Singaporeans, we stay in a very small country. So suddenly, we just get to see so much out there that to him is just mind blowing. It's just so fascinating. You can see countries that you probably never step foot in, like Afghanistan, like, for example, the Nordic regions. It's just so fascinating to live other people's lives from the comfort. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Raina. Amir, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the earliest film that really opened up my mind about cinema was the Iranian film called Heaven. It was by Amiruddin. This is back in the late 90s. At the time, I was kind of like shopping around for CDs. For you kids there, before there was DVDs or streaming, there's CD. I like to do, but it's really yes. So yeah, of course, being broke, we go to like all this store. But I was browsing around and then I saw this there been recommended by the store guy. So I watched Children Happen and then it's really captivated by the characters. Something that you can relate to, especially film about the siblings. But I can vouch for the film because I have lived in Tehran for 5 years. So when I watched the film, it's very familiar. Like the texture of the film, the live, landscape. So that kind of like got me thinking about other foreign films. So since then, I've been watching a lot of foreign films. I think they give me a better idea of other cultures. So I think that's uh, how films get connected. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Amir. I think it's quite interesting that both of you have somehow suggested different trends, especially Suarina. You mentioned how we have been embracing Korean cultural products, that is skincare products or K-pop songs. We are able to witness or observe countries where we would never step foot in. In that sense, we get also the chance when we're watching Children of Heaven, we get the chance to actually experience a different country, different culture, simply because Amir, I think because the film was recommended by a seller. So I'm genuinely interested in when it comes to say cinema world. What are the trends? If you could shed light on the trends today, what are the popular cultural trends that you can observe in that one? What are market trends today in Malaysia or Southeast Asian cinema at large? What genres have cropped up? What trends have we noticed? Maybe in terms of themes, in terms of talents. I'm also interested in to know if Cinema World has done any kind of predictive analytics around viewing habits of your subscribers.
I have the first slide out that will show the box office performance in 5 countries in Asia. Slide 1. Yeah, if we look at that, you could see the numbers. I have my numbers here, okay? But yeah. Now, if we look at, I just picked 4 countries in Asia. Okay, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines. we look at the box office. Now, this is from Box Office Mojo, the most reliable source for box office takings. And these are referencing only the international films. The top 5 titles, every single one of them, we look at that international box office hits in these countries. They are all Hollywood productions. All Hollywood productions. And if you look at that carefully, they're about the same throughout the 4 countries. And they are all superheroes. So what is the genre? It's superheroes. So in superheroes for a couple of years, and I believe it'll be superheroes for the next couple of years. Okay, that's one chart that I want everyone to see. And why is it that Hollywood is so strong, so strong? And first of all, I think we have to recognize the cognizant of the fact that Hollywood has been around for a really long time. And in that sense, they have perfected the art of filmmaking. Okay, number 2, over the years, they have really accumulated the experience. This uncanny ability to understand their audience. What are the audience looking for? I think they just know it. I mean, but then again, that was built through the years of experience. And when Hollywood make films, this is the third point, they don't make for local audience. They actually make for the global audience, and they're very specific who they are going after. For example, they're going after the young adults, or they're going after all the males. So there's this great sense of understanding their consumers, who they are targeting. And I believe that's why their success. They know the world, the audience. Everybody's looking for a superhero every day. Living a challenging world, we want a superhero. So they make lots of superheroes. And the other thing is, you notice there's also a lot of franchise movies. Why so? Because of the familiarity with the characters, with the big picture of each franchise. So that helps that helps Hollywood understand. I mean, franchise movies, there's already a brand and there's a familiarity with the character. And therefore, it's very much going to be a box office success. It's kind of, they do their numbers. We're going to bring in the box office numbers here. Having said that, of course, we have noticed that over the years, there is some fatigue already with superheroes. There is some level of fatigue. But they will still dominate the chart until there's some other breakthroughs that come forth. And I would like to say that last year, that breakthrough came in the form of Shahlan. I mean, it really. I mean, if you look at the box office charts right now, the only one that is non-superhero, really, it's very much Top Gun Maverick, and in that sense, Jurassic World. So that's where I think the market is going to be. And if I can show you the next one, which is the local box office numbers, and I have slide number 2. That is again the top 5 box office hits last year in each of the 4 countries, but it's our local or Asian movies. Now, if we look at these numbers, if I look at Singapore, of course, the most successful numbers usually come from Jack Neo, the most successful commercial director in Singapore. And it is a topic that is very familiar to every Singaporean. Amir, going to the Amir. So naturally, that becomes a hero. Fantastic box office taking. It did so well. And then we look now at Air Force, the movie, the movie, and we have pronounced that word, and the rest. A lot got to do again with action and local heroes. Okay, Indonesia, which we all know has a penchant for horror movies. So horror movies always dominate the charts. And KKN is a very local movie set in in a small village. So again, it resonates with the people. And for Indonesia, unfortunately, I wasn't able to access the box office numbers except for KKN because it did so well. It did about 26 million at the box office. But these are the admission number, the number of people who went to watch. Look at Philippines. Now, Philippines is also a country that also love 2 major genres, horror and rom-com. But in this case, Made in Malacanang took the top spot. Again, because this is about the Marcos family. So it resonates with the locals. So we look at all this. It's about familiarity with the culture, familiarity with the local context. So these are those. But if I'm able to have unfortunately, we can't show two slides, never mind. You notice that in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Philippines, the number one in the overall box office chart are the local movies. They did even better than your superheroes. So in Malaysia, Makila was number one overall. PKN in Indonesia and Made in Philippines, they topped the overall box office chart. So this tells me something. This tells me that at the end of the day, the locals do want to watch local stories. Stories that they are rather familiar with or characters that they're familiar with. So I believe that local films in each of these countries in Asia are strong, but they have to be commercial films. They have to be commercial films, okay? And then in terms of popular genres, last year, if you notice, there was a trend. Agatha Christie is back. The Whodunit is back. There's just so many popular Whodunit movies in the cinemas. And actually, personally, I'm a fan of that, and I watched, I think, most of it already. So yeah, perhaps I think audience just love complex mysteries, murder stories. Can remove the chart. So and there are two major franchise coming up. One that is played by Kenneth Branagh, and the other one that's played by Daniel Craig. So you saw that resurgence last year. And interestingly, before this resurgence, okay, I have to give CinemaWorld a little shout out, right? Over the last couple of years, we've been doing whodunit movies, mainly from France and Germany, because they're pretty good at that. And especially, we have one series called the French Murder series. It's basically, again, like your Agatha Christie's whodunit. You really don't know who the murderer is until the end, but into the murder plots and mysteries are your local legends, local myths, local history, local heroes. So that makes that series very popular, and that performed very well actually across all our territories. Will Whodunit come back in 2023? To a certain extent, yes, I believe so. In fact, Kenneth Branagh has another one coming up, another of his murder series coming, A Haunting in Venice is coming out in 2023. So that's one, the Whodunit. And second half of last, I think it's second half of last year, you also noticed that rom-com with the big A-listers suddenly hit our screens. You have Sandra Bullock, you have Julia Roberts, you have J-Lo, and they all actually did pretty well in the box office. They're in the top 20. I believe The Lost City with Sandra Bullock, overall, I think it was an 11th position overall box office. I think that's thereabout. So yes, but will it come back in 2023? I'm not hearing of any big rom-com with A-listers, but there are some strong romantic stories coming in this year. So maybe not rom-com, but romantic movies. Because at the end of the day, I think romantic movies are easy watch, they're heartwarming, and it still appeals to the broad audience. So these are the two things. On the independent film side, we noticed something. We noticed that they are a lot more bolder, and they are more daring. They touch on social issues, which commercial films try to shy away from. So you will see that you will see. I believe that will still come through for this year as well. In fact, I think Malaysia has one that I've read about, but I've not watched it. I'm still trying to find it, and I think it's called Stone Tunnel. That's one film I would love to watch myself. Yeah. So I think understand. You mentioned about, do we have predictive analysis? No, we don't. For a very simple reason. We are B2B. We work with partners like in Malaysia. We work with in Singapore. We work with startups. So we're not able to do that. But we are blessed with some partners who are willing to share with us all the viewership data. So this viewership data help us to shape our curation and help us to shape our scheduling so that it reaches the audience as and when we believe they're going to turn on the TV, be it on a linear channel or on an on-demand basis.
Okay.
So that's take on the genres and on the trend.
All right. Thank you, Suarina, for the insights. So it seems that while genres are somewhat determined by the dominance of Hollywood films, local filmmakers are still finding ways to tell local stories using the language of established genres, even if it's appropriated from overseas. Amir, what about yourself? Are there any genres that you think it's emerging or you find it interesting that we can kind of interesting genres that are open to newer experimentation?
Yeah. I think in context of Malaysian market, nothing has changed actually since the 80s. There's always a steady demand of horror films, comedy, and even like Suarina mentioned, love stories. But lately, I think in terms of the action film has been getting a lot of attention, especially high budget ones such as Pascal and Police Evo. And they kind of borrowed the Hollywood kind of format, with big budgets, big stars, elaborate fight sequence and choreography. So that's gaining a lot of traction. For the past years, I noticed. And even if you look at Makila as well, very, very big characters. So that's good. But, it's good that diversifying not just action film, but also period films. In Southeast Asia, especially our neighbors, Indonesians quite well with their genre films, especially like Sorina mentioned, the horror films. I think Joko Anwar's Penapi Setan pretty good. And also, I think there's another film called The Raid. I think that's one of the Indonesian film that somehow managed to penetrate the Hollywood market,
Yes.
and they managed to export, the Pancasila, right? And that becomes like a norm in Hollywood now. If you watch John Wick, oh, you see Indonesian martial arts. So it's a very interesting form of export, and I think it's good that not even Hollywood is looking at Asia, for in terms of the kind of films. And of course, we have to thank the Korean industry as well, with the latest development, right? Parasite. And I think films like psychological drama is becoming quite a trend. So these are the kind of films that I noticed making quite a wave in commercial world. And yeah, I think, and also for the independent films, um, Malaysian cinema making quite waves in the independent scene. You really can only find this in the film festival circuit. Interesting film, good films, and I think we have to try to show more of this film in our cinemas. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Amir. So I want to kind of draw back to our theme, connecting the world through films. And in our conversation, we've kind of alluded to the dominance of Hollywood. The challenge today, obviously, is that even though everyone is watching a lot of films, we're still limited in terms of the source. We're still connecting with the world, but mostly through Hollywood films, if not also through European film festivals. So there's this film festival scholar Anne Vogel. She once commented a few years ago that we need to actually go to Western film festivals to learn more about Asian cinema. So we are still connecting with each other, but through the West. And what's your thought on this? Are we watching enough films from neighboring countries within Southeast Asia and Asia, or is this important in the first place? Right? What do you think is the way forward?
Me first?
Yes, Sarina?
Um, Actually, there's a lot that can be said here. A lot, a lot. I'm just going to jump to a couple of points. This is really a great intellectual discourse for this topic. It is true that we have been connecting the world through Hollywood films. That's why the pop culture really is a Hollywood pop culture. But over the years, you see them being slowly, you see other players coming in, and of course we had the Japanese for a period, but they didn't last long. Now we have the Korean that lasted surprisingly pretty long, so that's pretty good. And there was a time that I thought what I call the C wave would take off, but it didn't quite take off. And then I was hoping the T wave, which is a Thai, would take off, but no, they were showing signs. But then it fizzled before it actually flied off, but the Korean stayed. So kudos for that one. And I feel that Hollywood will still continue to dominate. It will still continue to dominate, but they will slowly be chipped away by strong local firms or collaboration between Asian film producers, film collaborators. And But it all comes down to really understanding your audience. If I believe that if Asian filmmakers invest resources in understanding their audience, that will make a lot of difference. Number one. Number two, Hollywood's strength came from their history, came from basically their experience, came from understanding their audience, but also came from their mega and powerful PR and marketing machine. It is an established marketing machine, and they invest millions of dollars in that. So even before a film hits the cinemas, we're talking about the majors. Everybody would have already heard about it. But I think for Asian, unfortunately, that is not really quite the case. So, like it or not, I think having a big investing in PR and marketing is very important to get your films heard even before they hit the shores. And so that's something that I feel our Asian cinema has got to pick up from. However, having said that, I think Amir mentioned something about The Raid. The Raid was a great successful Indonesian story that Hollywood has picked up, and it became somewhat of a sleeper hit over in the West as well. And I think Joko Anwar has emerged, and a couple more filmmakers have emerged in Asia that they could help champion the Asian filmmaking. Hopefully they don't get transported to Hollywood like the Young did. They became making Hollywood films. So, but definitely films within the region, it can cross over the borders. Like I think Mat Kilau did pretty well in Singapore. And Singapore, others go to army, did cross into Malaysia. So I think there's some crossing within the Asian countries. Um, but I believe it can do better. I believe it can do better. And besides Hollywood, I think, as I mentioned earlier, Korean films. Korean is very strong in the drama series. As for the films, there are some bright and shiny ones over the years. Train to Busan, Parasite, of course, and of course all of I always get his name wrong. Chang Wook or
Park Chan-wook.
Chang Wook. I always get his three names wrong. Chang Wook's movies. I mean his recent Busan, his recent Cannes film. What is that called?
Decision to Live.
Yes. Now that's a good film. I mean, I think I prefer this to his previous film like Old Boys and everything else. Yeah. So we do have some brilliant talents in Asia, and but there's still some road to go, some ways to go, for Hollywood dominance to be totally removed from the cinemas.
Right. Thank you, Suarina. Amir, what about yourself? What do you think in terms of Hollywood films vis-a-vis local voices, local talents? Are we doing enough to encourage regional exchange when it comes to Southeast Asian cinema?
I think we are kind of improving. Especially the recent success of the Korean films, the Korean waves. It really kind of like there's a lot of awareness and demand on more Asian-centric films. But we also have to give credit to previous, filmmakers, like like Akira Kurosawa, Wong Kar-wai, Zhang Zimao, who paved way for the Asian cinema. And now that and the new filmmakers like Japan, Bong Joon-ho, and even Hayao Miyazaki, anime, right? They're actually influencing a lot of the young filmmakers, even from Western. So that's a good thing. So I think for me, coming from a film school, it's very important us to keep on, like introducing this Asian films, have a lot of discourse, in class. And if you pay attention to the film festival circuit, a lot of the films are also gaining our attention. I think in general, audience are already ready to experience new films besides what's being offered in Hollywood. I think Suarina's right. People are already tired of all this, like superhero films. They are now looking at other, like films in Asia. So in MMU, we talk about films as well. We even have a class on Asian cinema where we talk about the why and something much more in depth, and encourage as much as possible to, for them to be confident to tell their own stories. Because you'd be surprised how simple stories, local stories can actually connect people. Just like how when I watch Children of Heaven, right? It's a simple story about two kids, but the struggles, the pain that they suffer, it's something that you can relate as human beings. So yeah, I think we're making progress, and I think there'll be more. We can guarantee there'll be more films that have a lot of Asian aesthetics, even in Hollywood films. Yeah.
Okay. That's a very hopeful comment. I would just like to remind those who just joined us in this webinar. It's streamed live on Facebook. I just want to highlight that if you're watching this online, you can always post your question on the comment section. And after the conversation, we will kind of pick up a few questions and allow the speakers to interact with the audience online. I would like to expand, sorry.
And
China?
can I interject here?
Yes.
Because we're talking about Asian, well, how do we connect the words with films, right? And
Yes.
with Amir, I'm also very hopeful that Asian cinema will really evolve, and especially over the last couple of years, I think various governments have introduced grants that encourage collaborations, at least within Asia. Because if you look back at European films that does better, that travels more, that circulate more, are the European co-productions. So, and then if we look at the Nordic came out with the Nordic noir, and it became very popular with certain types of movies. They call it Nordic noir. It's also all becomes, it all started from co-productions as well. So I think if Asia comes together, which I like, Philippines has the Philippine, I think, Film Development Council. Singapore, we have one. I think when everybody comes together and put together the talents, I think Asia films do have a future. We just have to like really work hard on it and come together to combine the talents. Having said that, I know that it's collaborate joint productions can be quite a nightmare when it comes to the legal paperwork and the numbers and the accounting part of it. But that should help Asian films rise and go beyond Asia, so that so that Asians are no longer connecting to the world through the West. Okay, so that's my further take. And one last this is just a food for thought, okay?
Yeah.
Hollywood has always been a commercial vehicle. That's something for thought. It's purely commercial. Whereas outside of Hollywood, a lot of films are assisted by government grants. So something to think about.
Yes, definitely. Even today, I think Finance has come up with a number of policies to encourage filmmaking. And then there's also this initiative of film in Malaysia, FIMI, that has this 30% cash rebates. But most of the time, it sort of attracts foreign filmmakers who is doing their post-production in Malaysia, more so than benefiting the local film industry. But speaking of Asia or Southeast Asian cinema at large, I'd like to expand the discussion on this particular matter. And when it comes to Southeast Asian cinema, we know that a lot of one of the more experimental part of Southeast Asian cinema usually begins with making short films. So to some extent, we can say that short films are or signal the genuine voice of Southeast Asian cinema. And a lot of students, a lot of young filmmakers begin their career by making short films. So I'm just curious for Amir as well as for Suarina, based on your observation, how do you think that young talents have changed over the years in this region?
Okay, I go first. And then I have this to say. Cinema we have always been focusing on feature films. So short films, we are not an expert in that. I have to say that first. We just started going to this space, I would say, in 2020 when pandemic hits. The reason we went to this space is because we met several young filmmakers and film professionals who will lament that there's just no exhibition platforms. I mean, they make a film and then it just go for some festivals if it's successful for 2 years, and then it just disappear. It would become, especially student thesis film, it become just a series of numbers. So I thought that was pretty pathetic, pretty sad, pretty pathetic, especially when in film space. So we decided to take the bold step that even though we are a feature film channel and we did a feature film service, we decided to actually carve out a platform for that to an anchor to introduce short films and essentially really for independent filmmakers and young filmmakers, and they could be student filmmakers. So we did that, and so over these last 3 years, we are just amazed because we have curated films from Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Brunei, Sri Lanka. I think that's where currently we have. And what amazes us is the diversity of stories. I mean, there's sci-fi, there's even musical in a short, there's even a short series, and there's running theme. So we are impressed with the diversity. We're also impressed with the themes. As what you said earlier, Southeast Asia is really born out of short films, and that's kind of like a stepping stone. We all know that. Actually, Hollywood, Martin Scorsese also I believe, started with short films too. So I could be wrong, but I believe there's a lot of notable directors started with short films as well. So, and short films allow a very honest voice, a very unfiltered voice, if you wish. And these these young filmmakers are willing to be bold. So they take on topics like, for example, one of which kind of surprised me was like child marriage, underage marriage. But they did it so beautifully. That it's not confrontational, but it provokes thoughts, it provokes discussion. Or they even take on something that could be somewhat political, like riots. So these are challenging topics, and we have another Singaporean filmmaker that's based in Paris. She took on what we call microaggression. It's about racism, about stereotyping, but she did it in a comedy shot. So yes, I think just based on the last 3 years, I think talents abound and very bold take on challenging themes, difficult themes, but cleverly delivered so that it doesn't confront you head on, but it invites discussion, it invites the audience to think about it, to expand their mind on it. So yeah, that's my take on short films, really.
Okay, yeah, I think short films always have this flexibility because there's budget constraints. So Southeast Asian filmmakers always begin with short films, and in that sense, because there's a lesser risk to take due to the budget production costs, so they are more daring. It becomes this kind of sandbox for people to experiment. Amir, what about yourself? What do you think about the development of young talents, local talents in the region?
I can only speak for from the perspective of an educator, because
Yeah.
especially in our faculty, yeah, I can see that there's a lot of improvement, and students are becoming more bold in exploring different kind of topics. Like recently, a lot of they talk about child pregnancy. Child pregnancy, teen pregnancy. Sorry, or abortions, about religious diversity, and even film about identity crisis. I think these are topics that's usually frowned upon, not talked about. Now we're not given our low profile nature, but I think it's good and healthy that they explore this kind of stories, because they are, especially for young filmmakers in Asia or in Asia, trying to forge their own identity in the cinema. And and you can only see this film, mostly you can see this film in festivals, but even that audience is already growing. People want to see something more diverse. And one advantage I think young filmmakers have these days is because of there's so many platforms for them to get their dose of films. There's the OTT platform as well as another place where they can see other kinds of films and be exposed to other kind of genres. So this helps in diversifying the kind of stories that young filmmakers can make. And another thing is, with the internet, you're not limited to just the local stream. When you make a film, you can always submit to festival. Like your films can be shown outside of Malaysia, and that also is another way that you get exposed. And having platform like CinemaWorld as well is very important as well for students, so they can look forward to having their short films be shown. And short format is actually quite a good way of finding your own, crafting your own style of filmmaking. So it's a good practice ground, and yeah, you can take a lot of risks in short film. And I think it's getting a lot of attention of this short format.
Okay, thank you, Amir. Yes, definitely. Short film format has kind of gained grounds, especially in with the C focus. Sorry, not C C shorts. C shorts film festivals. We have a festival that is wholly committed to the promotion of short films, and that basically generates a lot of discourse about the importance of short films in Southeast Asia. Beyond just short films, the other genre that I think we can talk about is documentary. Just last year, CinemaWorld brought to its audience documentary feature or docu-films. I wonder how did the project go? Because it's often very challenging to screen documentaries, especially in a context where films are only viewed as entertainment. But I think in recent decades, documentaries as an art form are also becoming intensely fascinating, with films such as Joshua Oppenheimer's The Act of Killing, and then with filmmakers like Kristen Johnson, Wang Ping. There is this deliberate or strategic blurring of facts and fiction in these new non-creative creative non-fiction world. What are your views on the potentials of documentaries and on non-fiction films in general today? Suarina?
Yes, you are right. We decided to pilot test 3 documentaries. And let me just show you what are these documentaries very briefly. We have one on a Brazilian displacement story, another one which is a Danish produced by about an Iranian illicit love story, and then we have a Syrian refugee story. Now we thought these are very powerful stories to tell to the world, and these are feature documentaries, by the way, and they are either award nominees or award winners themselves in its own rights. But the truth is, they didn't perform very well based on some of the reports that we received from our partners. But so no, it didn't fly off. And I think there could be several reasons. One of which could be they're not. I mean, film audience may not want to find documentaries on a film channel. Maybe they watch it somewhere else, but not on film. They're asking to watch a film, and then why are you showing me a documentary? So perhaps there's that disconnect. Number 2, it could be that the topics are a bit too heavy for our Asian audience, or these are topics that they cannot relate. I mean, displacement story, they cannot resonate with that. Okay, so that could be, we figured that could be the problem, is the topics were too heavier, topics that are alien to them, or that they don't expect. When they're on a movie service, they want to watch a movie. But having said that, we are not giving up yet. We are still on the hunt for topics that we feel that will resonate with Asian audience. Perhaps it got to do with sports, perhaps it got to do with food. We don't know, but we want to check it out. Now, do docus have a place on our screens? I personally say yes. If you look at, I don't know if you're familiar with this sports docu called Free Solo. I think it won an award at Oscar, probably, perhaps the best docu. Free Solo is basically about climbing. Okay, so that is so exciting. That is so exhilarating. So that's something that I think. So there is thrill, there's suspense, there's action. Can he make it? Is he going to fall and is he going to die? So I think this will resonate with most audiences, number one. So that's about sports. And I also believe that there's something else that we did that actually worked for us very well. That's true stories. And these true stories are really dramatized fiction of a true event. So maybe a dramatized version of a true event resonate better with the audience instead of a hard docus. We don't know, but as I said, we're not giving up. We're just going to look for docus that will resonate. It will be a small percentage of our offerings, but true story is definitely one of our major curation pillar. So they could be dealing with tough or hard topics like traditions that ought to be like bride kidnapping and utopia. There is one movie called Different, which is actually executive produced by Angelina Jolie. Okay, that did pretty well, even though it is a dramatized version of a true event. And we have another true story about a murder in Australia. I can't remember what it's called right now, but Joe Sinkei just in case something, but that did very well as well. So I think dramatized version of a true story appeals to the audience, and yeah, we're not giving up yet, but I still believe that docus have a place. We just have to find the right one that resonate with the audience, or that resonate with film audience. That's what we're trying to do.
All right. All right. Thank you. Amir, what about yourself? What do you think about the role of documentary in this industry where audience are expecting entertainment?
I think it's not a bad thing for even documentary to have these entertaining elements. And I'm glad Suarina mentioned about dramatized version of Driven because I just finished binging this interesting documentary, local drama lah, about the rise of Ottoman Empire by Sultan Mehmed. It was really interesting. I mean, the production quality is really good. I mean, it's superb. But you know, when after a scene and then when they go into the historian's perspective, it adds more, it adds value to the series. So we have more awareness of all these interesting characters in history. So I think it's not a bad thing. Secondly, I think I feel like in terms of documentary, that format itself our form itself has evolved. Usually, when you watch documentary in the past, it's always about animals or like archaeological sites, and so we call a blue chip documentary. Very high budget. There's the voice of God. There's always some narrative behind the documentary. But nowadays, like you mentioned, Oppenheimer's act of killing, which is a very, which is a must for any documentary screening. Yeah, I mean the format itself is quite bold. Um, you allow the characters or the subjects to tell their own stories, to hear their own voices. The brilliant thing about that particular documentary is how bold the filmmaker is by allowing the perpetrators to not just talk about what they did in the past, but to also reenact. It's quite shocking and surreal. But that kind of innovation that makes documentary, getting a lot of attention. So it's good, It's this new kind of innovative way of storytelling is what makes people appreciate documentary filmmaking. And yeah, and also allowing the camera to tell the story is also very important. Again, we are it's no more about the voice of God, but rather let the subjects speak for themselves. Remember, like watching a lot of Vice documentaries, so that was pretty out there, very bold. So this sense of realness, I think, is what the audience are looking for. This sense of the raw kind of feel, what makes the documentary intriguing. Yeah.
Okay. Amir. So just now, I think both of you have been talking about topics. When it comes to documentaries, topics could be a little bit heavy or raw. So this is why it kind of deters some audience. But at the same time, I also recall that Suarina mentioned about this film in the Philippines that's very politically inclined, but it did very well. So it goes back to the idea of resonance. Could a documentary create or tell stories that actually resonate with the local audience? And this is, we have been circling about, when we talk about cinema, we've been circling around the idea whether cinema could be, apart from telling story, could it be a political tool? Especially when it comes to documentaries, these are all the discourse that will kind of emerge. So if in Southeast Asia, we are witnessing kind of a political transformation becoming increasingly complex today, one thing about the streaming platforms that we have been exposed to is that streaming platforms cleverly circumvented censorship. So certain films that are actually banned in Malaysia, such as Fundamentally Happy, directed by director Yuan Bin Lei and Lee Tiam Tan, they are banned in Malaysia, but they're available on platforms such as Movie in Malaysia as well. So I wonder if CinemaWorld has faced any challenges when it comes to censorship, when it comes to political cinema, especially in a tightly regimented but ironically somewhat liberal state like Singapore.
This is a sensitive topic, huh? Censorship. Okay. Our service actually travels across more than 10 territories in Asia. And each country has its own unique set of rules and regulations. CinemaWorld is a commercial entity. And as a commercial entity going to another country, I think the one thing that we have to do is to comply. So we have a complying spirit. We comply with regulations. So yes, all our firms are subjected to compliance. And so far, we have used Singapore standards, which has been generally accepted in most of the countries in Asia, China included. But we are also sensitive to Indonesia standards, and we are also sensitive to Taiwan's classification. Because for Taiwan, they apply classification. Certain movies cannot be shown at certain hours. So, and as for Malaysia, which is very unique, our service is delayed by an hour, the channel itself. Okay. And any films that we believe that could be subjected to some snipping because of topics, we will always send it over to our partner in advance for them to take a review and make a decision. Is this going to be banned? Is this going to be further censored? We will let them make the final decision. Okay, that's why there's an hour delay. Now, generally, I mean, and specifically, for example, talk about censorship challenges. Actually, there are only 3 areas that all the countries are in sync. Really, there are only 3 sensitive areas. Got to do with race, which is community anyway. Got to do with religion. Got to do with politics. All countries are very sensitive about these 3 topics. So, I mean, we curate films from literally around the world. So we do have a lot of, we have a lot of good films to choose from. So we deliberately will stay away from films that we know will put us in trouble straight away. I mean, no point. A film that's overly censored loses its story, and is no longer worthy to be watched anyway. So, but do we stay away from films that are political? No, not really. So, but we are careful. For example, there are some films that perhaps put communism in a lesser light. They may get censored in Vietnam. So we accept that. And then films that deal with sensitive topics, we, as I said, we will try to do the necessary edits, but without sacrificing the integrity of the movies. So actually, in our history, for more than 10 years, I recall we only have 2 films that were subjected to so many edits that I believe, and both are actually from UK. They are British films. But the trouble with these 2 films, not trouble, but the edits that we have are really about the language. So as an audience, when you watch the film, the experience is really not good because you will hear the beep sound throughout the whole film. And one of them is the award-winning Ken Loach movie. So I think it's Sweet 16. So there were no major visual edits, but really it's a sound edits. So yes, we are very careful in our curation of films. We don't go out to find trouble for ourselves. We still want to find a film for its credits, its good storytelling, it has good accolades, but we're mindful of the challenges. Like we're prepared to take certain films, like for example, for Malaysia, made in Israel is no. But we do have some Israeli movies with us. So, but it just get banned in Israel. It just get banned in Malaysia, but it's being seen in the rest of the countries. So we navigate very carefully on censorship. That's one. Number 2, you mentioned about streamers. Now, the streamers can geo-block. For example, if the film is not suitable for something, Netflix can geo-block it for the country, like in Singapore. Now, all the various pay service operators have implemented what they call parental locks or R21 locks. So again, even on the traditional platform, certain films are not suitable for the great audience. Like in Singapore, they have become a little bit more liberal in that sense. They allow for R21, but it must have a parental lock, for example. So, so all these tools have been in place so that most films can be played, but subjected to certain level of edits if required. Minimum, we don't do much edits actually most of the time. At the same time, our platform will do the necessary locking if need be. For example, our CinemaWorld on-demand service in Singapore, it is uncut in its original form, but there are locks in place if it's a R21. So you need a certain password to unlock it. So yeah, we navigate very carefully, but I wouldn't say we have major problems because over the last more than 10 years and our previous experience in our HBO days, we have kind of know what are the films that that can be shown and what totally cannot be shown. We kind of learned that already. Yeah. Okay.
Just right now. What about Amir? Amir, I think well, when to also bring back to the title, connecting the world to films. There's in this case when we're talking about censorship, there's a limit to the nature of contents that we can distribute. And Suarina just now mentioned mindfulness. I wonder what's the perspective from an educator. It's when we talk about censorship, it's often very tricky, right? To what extent do we educate? To what extent do we tell students what can be included or what cannot be included, or do the students eventually, when they enter into an industry, they have to learn it by themselves? What is the perspective from an educational standpoint when it comes to censorship?
Okay. So when it comes to censorship, yeah, it's always a challenge for filmmakers or anyone in the creative field. But for me as an educator, this limitation is actually quite valuable for the learning process, not just for film, but education in general. Giving certain limitation would encourage students to think outside the box, to see things in a different perspective and to find new solution to the problem. So like in our school, we always remind our students on the context of where they are when they embark on their filmmaking journey. But we don't stop them from exploring any kind of topic of interest. So as long as they understand the limitation, they have to kind of like work around the limitation. How do you solve the problem? Um, so critical thinking aspect of filmmaking for me, is very pivotal for the education. Their deep understanding of film language, about composition, will help them in telling their stories. Like we can go back to like Iranian filmmakers, they are brilliant because if you look at their censorship, that's way strict than any other I've seen. But yet that doesn't stop them from telling good stories. They use symbolism, they use metaphor to tell their story, to talk about the challenges. So this is where film theory comes in, the understanding of film language, understanding of metaphors. So that's how you go about all these challenges, and that will make you a much better storyteller.
Okay, thank you, Amir. That's a very good response.
Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
I just want to mention that we had two movies on honor killing. One produced by Iraqi filmmaker, another one is Canadian and I think Iraqi co-pro. Honor killing is very sensitive in certain countries, Indonesia and Malaysia. Both the films are not banned at all. It's how, as what Amir mentioned, it's how they tell the story, the perspective. And I agree with Amir on the metaphors. It helps to circumvent a lot of issues. Yes.
It's like metaphors or even humor, I guess.
Yes.
Of humor, satire, or
Yes.
parody.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, just to also remind those who are listening to this webinar from Facebook, if you have any questions, feel free to post it in the comment section and the speakers will address your question. I guess I'd like to pose a final question, perhaps. So when it comes to streaming platforms, we have arrived at a point in time where some scholars have called it post-cinema, right? Because of this, the death of cinema, Netflix, and all. The not only Netflix, in fact, right? The popularity, widespread use of YouTube and other media for screening films. How do you think streaming platforms and the internet are affecting cinema and the audience in general? What habits have changed throughout these few years?
Okay. First and foremost, streaming is just another delivery platform in addition to our various existing delivery platforms. So bear in mind, it's from a consumer point of view, it doesn't matter to them how a film is being sent to their screens. It doesn't matter. It can be streaming, it can be IPTV, it can be cable, it can be TV. It does not matter. But the beauty of streaming is it brings forth multi-screens. Now the small screens can start showing videos. Just like before that, we have IPTV that brings forth on demand. So now you can choose and watch where as and when you want. So with every technology, there must be an additional benefit. So with streaming right now, it's multi-screens and you can do it on T1 as well. So that's the beauty of streaming. So with streaming, it has created a different viewing behavior. If you look at traditional, everybody's watching on the big screen, which is, of course, you have the cinemas, then you have the big TV, and then you have the small screens right now. So we basically were talking about fragmentation of the audience time. Okay, so cinema, going to the cinema will always be around, and I'll talk about that later. Now, big screen is now today is really for family viewing, and for certain kind of content are still best viewed on the TV screen. And that's, for example, if you watch a football match, you want to view it on the big screen still, okay, to see the action. And if you watch a nature docus, nothing beats a big screen. And you watch even live action movie, especially if you're watching movies with a lot of special effects and CGI, big screen is still better. So it's more a family viewing, a lot of folks. Whereas streaming enables, as I said, multi-screen, including your laptops, your mobile phones, your computer. It allows for what I call intimate viewing. It's more one-on-one. It's more even two. It's a very intimate, very very personal space. You have that personal space. Will all this take away cinema admissions? It has definitely adversely impacted, but that doesn't mean that cinema days are over. Cinema will still be around. That's why we have, in those days, big halls, to today we have all the small cineplexes, smaller screens. Okay, he has to cope with the changes. Cinema will be around because one, going to the cinema is a deliberate decision, it's a conscious decision. It is an event. It is an outing. That it's not just watching a film. You buy your popcorn, you hang out with your friends. So it's an event. Going to cinema is an event. It's a date. Okay, it's a social life. It's on a social calendar. That's going to the cinema, and of course, it helps with all the seats and the whole sound effect as well. Okay, so but since it's an event, the film that you're going to must make the event even more eventful. So what kind of films would you invest your time and resources to? Okay, it would have to be really big budget films. It would have to be films that think of the likes of the Maverick. Was it the Tom Cruise Maverick? Top Gun. Think of big budget films. Think of films that needs a sound effect, that need the special effects. I think these are the films that will still save the cinemas. And it would have to be, therefore it's going to be your action adventure, it's your superhero stuff again. But all three will coexist in them. Each will have its own unique space. The big TV screen, the small screen, and the cinema. Because so it's not about shifting of audience from one screen to the others, but it's really about audience fragmentation. And this is what we have observed in the industry. It is all about audience fragmentation. Yeah. So now the pie has been cut out into 3 parts.
Okay, thank you, Suarina. Yes, indeed. I think audience fragmentation is the perfect term to describe it. To some extent, when we're watching films, we're also watching our mobile phones. So it's not just fragmentation of different platforms. It is also using multiple screens at the same time. Amir, what about yourself? What do you think when it comes to the death of cinema? What is your response to that?
I don't think cinemas die. In fact, I think okay. Let's go back to the OTT first. Suddenly, it has changed the behavior of audiences, especially young kids these days. Because besides the OTT providing a lot of new films or new kinds of genre film platform, the audience now has the power to pause, to skip important scene, which is it may cause disruption in the storytelling, especially if the scene is very important to the film. So that could take away the magic of being immersed in the story. And this is probably because of they're so used to the short format, like YouTube content is very short, right? So their attention span is very short. I remember the time when back in the days, film used to be 4 hours, 5 hours, and there's intermission, or films go for 2 hours. Nowadays, 2 hours is already quite long for them. So yeah, so it's a different kind of audience, which I think new filmmakers have to be aware of. Um, um, so and then because of this convenience, like as Suarina mentioned, going to the cinema is optional. So to entice film goes to the cinema, I think have to be worth the experience. So I guess if you look at cinema these days, there's a lot of investment in technology like IMAX, 4D, 3D, like 3D surround system. So those are the things, kind of help innovate a bit for cinema experience. But yeah, it definitely is a game changer for the operators and also for film producers. But on the flip side, this new behavior, of short format also is an opportunity for filmmakers to tell different way of tell stories. We're so used to like landscape format, right? But nowadays it's horizontal. So it's a different kind of experience. So the storytellers of today have to think about these new audiences, right? Um, Especially when technology is becoming cheaper, so you have to innovate. And then all this I look at this as a disruption, but it's only through disruption that you can start innovating, and something new will come. It's really about adapting, trying to be creative. I think nowadays, if you notice, actually now a deeper awareness and or appreciation towards about cinema in general. Despite all these alternative platform, people still go to cinema because it's a different experience. You cannot beat like going to a dark place, enjoying your popcorn. It's like a ritual. It's very nostalgic. So like for example, I mean, a good example is like look at the music industry. Sure, the world is very dominant. I mean, the streaming platform is a dominant platform, and that's the uh, current business model. But the demand for vinyl records is also pretty high. We hear, you see a lot of all this. Even my students, a lot of them are, they start collecting vinyl records. They actually even bought cassette players. There's something about the old ways that they appreciate. So I don't know. I think it's we may think it's dying, but at the same time, I feel like it's kind of like there's more appreciation for cinema. So yeah, I'm quite excited to see where this goes.
Okay. Okay, I guess the advice is to take this opportunity as a way to innovate, to tell a more interesting story, but through a different form.
Immersive films that invites immersive experience will thrive in cinema. You need to have an immersive experience. Yeah.
Mm. And I guess with the change when it comes to media literacy, that immersiveness would also change. Now maybe a desktop cinema may be more immersive because of Zoom meetings, online virtual meetings that we have. So Zoom desktop cinema becomes more immersive than say high budget film, perhaps. All right. So before we conclude, I'm just wondering if there's any final remarks that both Suarina and Amir would like to share to our audience, or maybe even to some of our students from FCA listening from Facebook. Any final remarks for the future filmmakers or people in the industry?
Be bold, be authentic in telling your stories. I mean, in our curation just for short films for the last 3 years, I would say that many a times we came across short films with original ideas, very good ideas, but then the storytelling is unfortunately not quite there. So I think storytelling is, to us, the way we curate films, when we curate even international films, storytelling is just so important. That's number one, because at the end of the day, I think we always look at what do the audience want. Audience at the end of the day, when they come to a film, they came for entertainment. So storytelling is very important to entertainment. And then an original idea will be a lot more seductive to them as well. Yeah. So we will talk about authentic, original idea plus strong storytelling. And I think, personally, I feel that the Middle Eastern films have great storytelling capability. That's that. So do the Nordic countries. Yeah, Hollywood is great with ideas. It's great with its production quality. Each of the countries have its own strength. So if a student should do a film history study and just pick up all the best spots and market them. But having said that, I think there's a lot for young filmmakers in Asia, especially with you mentioned streaming that allows for all short films, because short film content to me is what I call legitimized entertainment right now. It's no longer just kind of like, something that people will just watch it if there's nothing else to do, but people do go out to look for short form content, especially with the popularity of mobile streaming, the dominance of mobile streaming in several Asian countries. So short form content um, consumption is definitely going to rise. And as Amir mentioned earlier, short attention span. Now that's a problem, by the way, short attention span, but it is good for short form content. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Short films. And today we even talked about micro fictions or flash fiction that are even shorter than short films.
I know.
Amir, what's your thought on this?
I guess, for you young filmmakers, don't just sit down in front of your computers writing scripts and watching films. Go out there and, experience life. Go out there, travel the world, experience new culture, experience art, read more books, because that's really the way you find new ideas for your film. So go out there and experience life. That's it.
Yeah. Talk to people.
Yeah, talk to
Talk to
people.
people.
Get your heart broken, because that's still be the essence of it.
Yes, I think that
A lot of films. Watch a lot of films. Yes.
Yeah, I think those are really important advice. I think when we talk about experience or getting out there, experience is so important because when we are stuck on a screen, everyone has the same access to the same information. But when you go out there, when you talk to different people, different clash of personalities will generate different forms of conversation. And that's where originality comes in.
Mm, yes.
All right. So I guess that's how we conclude the session. Thank you very much for the very meaningful conversation. We have somehow moved from the importance of short films to the politics of documentary films. We have also talked about censorship, audience fragmentation, and some of these topics I think are quite dear to us as educators at MMU. But it's always fascinating to hear from an industry person who needs to always make all these difficult decisions, juggling between market needs, the audience, regulators, and of course, not to forget the voice of local filmmakers. So please join me in thanking our speakers, Suarina and Amir, for their time and insights. And with that, I will conclude the session. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.